Hello. Hello. All right. Everyone, how's everyone doing? Tell me how you're doing. Tell me how your day's going. My face is glowing, shiny. I shouldn't say glowing, shiny because I just got out of the shower and put a bunch of shit on. Let me make sure. Hey, how's everybody's Monday or Mondays? How's everybody's Sunday going? I need one of those things that you can like put your laptop on. Somebody asked, what does IOF mean? It means Israeli Occupational Forces, as other people have said. Oh, thank you, Keithy. So, you guys, there are so many insane things that happened this week that I just wanted to Israeli diaper forces. Oh my gosh, that's really funny. So, hi, San Pablo. Hey, everyone. Happy to see you guys. I was actually, oh, wait, mic check. Can you guys hear me? Let me know if you guys can hear me. Oh, blue coffee. I haven't had a chance to look into that yet, but I will. And I will, in fact, maybe at the end of this stream, Khalid, maybe at the end of the stream, I can go over it, but I want to go over the ones that I prepared for you guys. There's basically, it's a bunch of clips and interviews of the IOF admitting that they target innocent civilians. Oh, good. Thanks, Chris Munn. Targeting innocent civilians and admitting it despite all the gaslighting. I don't know if you guys saw the debate with Destiny and on Breaking Points, where he basically just like gaslights the other guest and just like denies everything that's happening and continues to do the whole Israel is the most moral army in the world. They do more than any other army ever has to avoid civilian casualties, like that routine. So I want to go through some of those clips and then I want to watch the clip just for funsies because we need to laugh. Shit's really depressing. It's really depressing. So we need to laugh. So I pulled the unbearable. I don't know if you guys saw this or heard of this, of Kristi Noem trying to do damage control and Sean Hannity trying to do damage control for her after she admitted herself, no one forced her to, that she killed her puppy. So embarrassing. Oh, yeah. 155 STW. I tend to agree with you on that. I think that he could definitely be using it for a lot better than he is. So sorry, I keep saying I'm still trying to get used to streaming, so bear with me, you guys. I'm not as used to streaming as I am doing TikToks or Instagram or whatever. So just bear with me. And then after this, I'm gonna like try to make it like a shorter thing and like cut it so I can cut out some of the space or whatever. Anyway, I pulled up some of these clips. Hi, Nar. Hi, Kin. Thank you, honey. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. So let me see. First one. Oh, and we're gonna make fun of Piers Morgan because we like to make fun of Piers Morgan. Piers, but do you condemn Hamas? Morgan. So I need to share my screen to pull up the first clip. Actually, let's watch this one first. I don't know if you guys saw it. You might have seen it. It was the interview that Channel 4, Khalid, oh, sorry, real quick. Khalid asked, did anybody approach you to do Israeli propaganda? I've heard of YouTube TikTokers got the offer from them. A lot of them do. A lot of them do. I did not, but many of them have. And a lot of people have been very open about that. Are you guys familiar with that TikToker? Oh, I forget his name, but he used to just do like somebody, his name is like Xavier something. And then he basically started doing propaganda for Israel. One of those companies went to him, picked him up, started paying for him to do propaganda. And then he got hired by PragerU, which is a psychotic right-wing pro-Israel propaganda outlet that calls itself PragerU, despite the fact that it is not a university. Let me see. Would I go on Piers Morgan? Of course I would. Are you kidding me? If he invited me, yeah, I would. So let me see. All right. So what we're going to go over, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen it, but I want to talk to you guys about it and I want to get your thoughts on it. The video that was done, or the interview that was done by Channel 4 last week where there is an IOF soldier that is interviewed by Channel 4 admitting that they do target civilians, despite the fact that they're always claiming that they just take so much care not to hurt civilians. You know what I'm saying? Khalid, wait, Pierce Moral Quandary Morgan. That's funny. So that is funny. You guys are funny. Let me see. By the way, the doctors told Pierce to condemn Hamas at least 3 times a day to increase his stupidity. Oh my gosh, that's really funny. So one of the things before we get started wait, I forget. How do you share? You guys, I appreciate you guys being so patient with me because this is kind of weird to still try to get used to. So I appreciate your patience. Let me see. Oh, right. Present. You can share your screen. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to encourage you, if you are able, if you can, to join and become members of my Ko-Fi. Ko-Fi is basically like Patreon, but I've heard a lot of people say that Patreon sucks. So I decided to go to them instead. It's my same name. I am Blakeley. You can either do a one-time donation or you can become a member. I would love to see you guys become members and support my work. And also, even if you want to send a single super chat in this stream or a sticker or whatever, you can do that too. And I really appreciate the support. As you guys know, my channel is very small. I'm trying to grow it. So please subscribe and all of that, even if you don't join the Ko-Fi. So enough of that. Oh, Khalid, you're right. I thought I linked it to my profile. I might not have because I just made it. I just created it. Let me see. All right, so let's watch this video and talk about how psychotic they are. Stop screen share. Just crazy. It is crazy. And let me know that you guys can hear it. Once we start this, tell me if you guys can hear it. There's got to be a easier way to go between tabs than having to actually click on this every single time. Jeez. I think I have a link tree in one of my bios. I think I did, but I link all my stuff anyway in my bio. I just didn't have the Ko-Fi yet because I just started it. But in any event, I appreciate everyone's support if you can. And even if you can't or don't want to, supporting my channel obviously helps it grow, and subscribing and all that. All right, so let's watch these lunatics. So as I said, some of you may know, some of you may have seen this, that this is an Israeli soldier. He hides his identity, which is understandable, talking about their awareness and them totally being fine with it, that they are targeting civilians in Gaza, despite what everyone says all the time. Oh, they don't target civilians. They do everything they can to protect civilians. Lamau.
Israel's war in Gaza has been one of the deadliest and most destructive in modern times.
Can you guys hear?
Its army insists it's only targeting Hamas, but it's accused of exacting a brutal collective punishment on the entire population.
Do you think that you witnessed war crimes taking place?
Probably. The ground assumption is that they are Hamas.
Okay, good.
And then if you go this way, you're bound to kill people that are not.
Now, in a rare interview, one soldier tells us about the reality he says he witnessed.
This is something that I'm going to carry for the rest of my life.
Jake, not his real name, had already served his mandatory.
We might have missed it, but he just said the assumption is that everyone is Hamas. Everyone is Hamas, including babies, including women, children, grandmas. So that's number one. And they lie about that. Because if you say, well, that's very convenient, because if you say, well, we only target Hamas. But if you think everyone's Hamas, that kind of answers the question.
Military service and was an opponent of Israel's occupation of Palestinian land. But the horror of the October 7th attacks, when hundreds of Israelis, mainly civilians, were killed by Hamas, felt different. It was the worst single attack.
Let's just stop it right there and do a fact check. A lot of the civilians that were killed that day were killed by Israeli fire. This isn't a conspiracy theory. These are things that have been reported in Haaretz, which is an Israeli outlet. There have been that were there on October 7th, citizens of Israel who have said that they were targeted, that there was friendly fire, that there was indiscriminate shelling. So let's not pretend that all the civilians that were targeted on October 7th were done strictly by Hamas.
Attack is suffered in the country's history.
There are literally people going around in Israel killing innocent civilians, right, all around. And this is something that needs to be stopped. And I'm needed partly to do that as well, especially in the first couple of weeks. It felt right. So yeah, it just sense in a way that it didn't before.
Israel's response in Gaza came soon. First, a massive and deadly campaign of aerial bombardment.
At what stage did you start to have concerns about how the war was being fought?
I was serving in a commanding unit of a battalion that was fighting in Gaza. On the first couple of weeks, no one went in, right? So we were just sitting on our asses, essentially looking in screens, essentially the drones going above Gaza. You just go through those channels and you look for those buildings just falling. It feels like Netflix. It feels like a video game for the first couple of days. But there is a moment you realize it's a freaking actual house. It just got completely destroyed. And I don't know, but there probably were some people in there. Maybe there are terrorists, maybe there are not, or Hamas, whatever. But you don't know. And then you start asking yourself, are all of those strikes, airstrikes, necessary? Or are we just having a light hand on the trigger here? And then it starts, and once it starts, it never stops.
The bloody images from October the 7th traumatized the country. Scenes of some Gazan civilians celebrating or participating.
Yeah, they keep to bring that up and be like, oh, well, there were some Gaza citizens who were celebrating. And okay, there's millions of people that live in Gaza. You guys are acting like it's every single one of them. And you act like you don't understand why some of the citizens would have joined in, or why they would have did what they did. But also, it's so dark that they admit that they treated it like a video game, that they didn't consider whether or not there were civilians in those buildings, that they didn't consider whether or not whether they were Hamas or whether they were just regular civilians, and that they're just pressing buttons. It's like a game. They don't care. It's so sick.
In the attacks, fueled existing bitterness and hatred.
When you're watching these screens, what's the mood like of other people around you?
A lot of people are happy to see that we're back. That's like the Israeli retaliation.
And was that because they were convinced that they were hitting Hamas fighters, you think, or it went beyond that?
A lot of them don't draw the line between what we call militants or terrorists and what we would call civilians. After the 7th, for example, people saw those videos of those people being paraded through the streets around Gaza, right? And those people cheer or even take part in whatever it is. So they say, like, all of them are part of it. Like, they all support it.
Was that quite a widespread view that everyone in Gaza is complicit?
Very much so. For many of the people around me, that was the thing. It came from saying, the kids that we spared in the war in 2014, right? Those are the kids that we spared then are now the terrorists that did the 7th, right?
It's a bit the implication there being, if you kill a kid now?
That's just so insane. It's just so insane that they're just admitting that. They were saying it was about getting Hamas, but then this guy's admitting that there were people that did not see it that way. They just saw it as a revenge tour. And probably the most chilling thing that he said there was that oh yeah, you guys have to worry about the videos right now that I'm using. It's fine. I think that one of the things that I think is the most chilling is that he admit that they look at children that survived the 2014 attacks as future possible Hamas militants, and thus it's okay to kill them and that they should kill children because they might grow up to be a militant. They might grow up and want revenge. Balaric, about what you're saying, I get that, but like I am seeing a lot of other people use it. A lot of other people do it. So, you know, I'm just like, I don't know how every single one of them work, but people do commentary on other videos all the time, like all the time. I've already seen 4 different channels do commentary on this. So I get what you're saying, but you know, I'm trying to find things that I can comment on that I see other people commenting on. So it shouldn't like be, you know, a huge deal, but I appreciate it anyway, you mentioning it. Yeah, sounds cleansing. Yeah. It just bothers me. And I do think it's so chilling that that kind of thing wouldn't make front page news. Like that's something that should make front page news everywhere. That this guy is admitting that they target children because they think they might grow up to be militants. So when they say we're not women and children, we really care to protect the civilians, you've got their people coming out and saying, no, that's not true. We look at these children as the future Hamas militants. So whatever we do to them is fine. It's so dark.
It's okay.
Everyone, yeah. That was, I want to say the majority, but it was alarmingly widespread in the people around me talking about this.
Thousands of Palestinian civilians have been killed in Israel's assault in Gaza. The military insists it does everything possible to avoid casualties and blames Hamas for hiding amongst the population. But footage like this, obtained by Al Jazeera, documents how apparently unarmed Palestinians have at times been deliberately hunted down. The Israeli army has said it's investigating this incident, but that it occurred in an active combat zone where Hamas fighters often dressed in civilian clothing. When Jake was serving, he says it was clear they required special permission to fire on buildings such as schools or mosques. But overall, the prospect of wrongly killing civilians was not a major concern.
No one is betting an eye. No one is questioning. It's like that if someone is in this area that we are in because everyone was supposed to be evacuated, if someone is there, they are Hamas.
On multiple occasions, fleeing Palestinian civilians have been filmed being shot, apparently by Israeli soldiers. Here, a grandmother is gunned down next to a child waving a white flag. The army says it's examining the incident. 3 Israeli hostages have also been mistakenly shot dead by troops.
Were there times when subsequently it became clear that they were civilians or weren't armed at least?
There was a guy holding something white or having a white t-shirt that was like, what's going on the radio? And he was approaching one of the places where one of the units was. And then the soldiers starts yelling, like in Arabic, stop, stop, I will shoot you. And then the person starts running away. And then he shoot them and kill them. And then you ask yourself, like, did we kill someone who was just, was in the situation?
Were other soldiers around you, were they worried by what happened? Troubled by it?
Not really. I don't remember anyone talking about that. I think the thing here is they need to prove that they are not the enemy. The ground assumption is that they are Hamas. And then if you go this way, you are bound to kill people that are not, right?
It's so insane. The ground assumption is that they're Hamas, and it is up to the civilians. It's up to the grandmas. It's up to the 5-year-old child holding a white flag to prove that they're not Hamas. Oh, and they're going to end themselves. They're always investigating themselves. And you'll notice that, like, no one asks about these investigations afterward. Like, no one follows up. How many times have we heard these ghouls say, like, oh, we're investigating it? Are you, though?
Israeli soldiers have been documenting the war in Gaza themselves on TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah, literally.
Some show soldiers trashing Palestinian homes. Others celebrate or mock the massive level of destruction. The army has said it will punish those breaching rules on conduct. The military has ordered the leveling of official buildings and individual homes.
again, the idea that they're going to investigate, oh, we're gonna punish the soldiers, okay? We're gonna the soldiers and hold them accountable. We're gonna investigate. It's like, no, you're not. And no one follows up. No one follows up to hold them to account at all. It's just insane. I know, fake criminal investigations. Also, you know what, another thing that I love is when you hear Israelis with their crocodile tears talking about how, you know, everyone's anti-Semitic and we're all trying to make them look bad at this and that. But it's like, do you clowns understand that it has been your footage that has made you look bad? Like, no one to try to make them look bad. Their own TikTok, their own Instagram videos, their own videos that they post and upload themselves is what makes them look bad. But then they're like, everyone's trying to make us look bad. I don't know. Maybe you should stop uploading your war crimes and laughing about it. Just a suggestion.
Across Gaza, part of efforts, it says, to dismantle Hamas's extensive tunnel network and infrastructure.
Hamas,
The scenes are often glorified by soldiers online.
Was that a common attitude?
Yeah,
For
for
sure,
real,
like
Charles.
celebrating destruction. Many people are just like very happy that they feel like this is the payback. We show them what we can do, and now they will be afraid of us and not do it again. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. This is the payback. We show them what we can do. It's like, why are you acting like you're brave when you are attacking these people that have no defense? You're not brave because you attack a bunch of defenseless people that are trapped in a cage. Like, we're gonna shame. Also, I like how he's admitting that it's about revenge. I thought this was about defense. Okay, it's just ridiculous.
We also had at some point people start kind of a tough thing going in to see the destruction, to take photos of it, to also take photos of yourself with feel like big soldier that, was this fight.
How pathetic.
So did it feel like decisions were being made that were proportionate or
Bro,
not?
that's so pathetic. Like, he's talking how they wanted to take pictures of themselves like tourists and the destruction that they had wrought. Like, there's some bad soldiers. No, these guys are the weakest people in the world. That's why they have to bomb them, because they're so weak that they won't fight the Hamas militants in the street. They won't fight them in a fair fight, which is why they target them through bombing campaigns and just target women and children. But then they're acting like they're all badass. This is so embarrassing. Oh my gosh. Oh, I know, right? I know, right, Patrick? Charles? Like, totally crazy. Yeah.
Oh, some decisions were not proportionate. Some decisions had also
You
this
think?
ulterior motive in them of making this extra destruction, making this extra message for the people there.
Even soldiers with mainstream political backgrounds express views Jake found shocking. And some of those serving are followers of small but influential extremist parties in the government. They've been behind the most radical rhetoric, including calls to rebuild Israeli settlements inside Gaza.
Were there many soldiers serving around you who were supporters of?
But no one ever says anything about that. You know what I mean? Like, live upside down world where they're always talking about the theoretical threat that Palestinians pose to Israel. Always this theoretical threat. But they never actually talk about the fact that the Israelis are actually doing it. They're like, oh, Hamas said if they could, they would do it again and again and again. Okay, that's a story, but them theoretically, the threat is not the same thing as what Israel is actually doing, what they're doing in real life right now. Like, it's just delusional.
Of extremist politicians, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, figures like that.
There are, and sometimes also in a quite higher up positions. There are people who live in the West Bank, or people that used to live in Gaza and Gush Katif, right? And when you hear them speak, that is chilling. When they talk about Palestinians, when they talk about the solution that they see to this conflict, those things are really, really scary.
What kind of stuff would they say?
There are no uninvolved, only unarmed.
That was a common phrase.
not a common phrase. I heard it from a few people. It became like common in circles.
As the conflict continues to rage in Gaza, Jake is grappling with the role he's played.
No, that's like psychotic. There are uninvolved, only unarmed. Like, can you imagine if they said that about, like, if a Palestinian said about Israel or an Israeli, it would be all the drama. It would be all the night after night after night after night news coverage about it. But they say these things about Palestinians all the time, like it ain't no thing. And everyone just moves on. It's unreal.
In it.
Do you feel responsible yourself then?
Yeah, this is something that I'm going to carry the rest of my life, obviously. And the way I look at it, my way of redeeming myself is to do anything I can to make justice and peace in this area.
You're quite emotional.
It's a shitty situation, right? When I was there, I was doing it. Now it's just being done in my name. It's horrible. And it's very frustrating and despairing knowing this is where we're going, right? Because you have to look at the 7th, right? Which was also a horrendous event. And essentially what it feels like our government and their government, Hamas, right? They are actually on the same team that essentially want to see this piece of land just being soaked with blood.
Well, I'm sure the vast majority of Israeli soldiers would, just like the army media wing, reject the allegation that they've
Of
callously
course they did.
killed Palestinian civilians.
We're the most
Speaking out
moral army
against
in the
the
world.
military's conduct is now really something of a taboo in Israeli society. Views that you heard in that report, the anger at the killings and abductions carried out by Hamas on October the 7th, the desire for revenge, the idea that somehow much of Gaza complicit, that's all pretty common here. And even amongst those Israelis who are critical of Prime Minister Netanyahu, support for the army remains high, despite the terrible scenes we continue to see out of Gaza.
Sikandar, thanks for your report.
Yeah, that's the thing that...
Well, in a statement, the Israeli army told us it is committed to mitigating civilian harm and makes great efforts to consider collateral damage in its strikes. They say that the military is fully committed to respecting all applicable international legal obligations, including the law of armed conflict, and that considerations of proportionality and military advantage are evaluated.
Okay, that's enough of that. Oh my gosh, they're such liars. They're such liars. It's out of control. It's ridiculous. We're really committed to following international law. No, you're not. No, you're not. You break it all the time. And then you get the United States and the UN to run cover for you. Fuck out of here. It's just dark. And it's dark that that the citizens of Israel continue to support this after all these images coming out, like that they continue to stand by it. It's really unconscionable. Yeah, and also referring the always dehumanizing language when it comes to the Palestinians. Oh, it's, you know, they're just collateral damage. Yeah, you're right, Nar. Could end this with phone call right now. He doesn't, because he doesn't disagree. Oh, thank you, Type. I appreciate that. Yeah, the reason why Biden stopped what's happening is because he doesn't disagree with it. That's what's so fucked up. That's what's so sick about this whole thing, is that he does the same tap dance that they do. Oh, we're concerned about Palestinian civilians and collateral damage, but he could end this right now. Yeah, he could end this right. I'm convinced that he wants to lose, because if the Democrats didn't want to lose, they would not be behaving like this. It's insanity how they're behaving. All right, now I got to show you guys the Piers Morgan IDF spokesperson video. No, it's not those clowns. It's not those clowns. It's this one. Okay, so this is actually a perfect video to get to, because this is now a video that is, this is a video, Piers, but do you condemn us? Morgan interviewing the IDF spokesperson. And it's amazing because as you watch it, you will see him pretend to care by doing the same talking points that they had written out for them in their propaganda pamphlets. So they had propaganda pamphlets written where they would say, this is what you should say to appear sympathetic when killing Palestinians. And he goes through all the talking points. He does all of it. And of course, Piers Morgan doesn't push back on most of what he says. He just takes it face value. It's so even when he's at, but there is a part of this that I love, that we're going to make fun when we get to it. I am going to, I'm going to do it though, just because.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed that Israel will press ahead with its offensive in Rafah, regardless of whether the war is paused and alive.
Yeah.
And you were satisfied that that was the case. Wounded. I spoke to a British doctor yesterday who just got back from one of the few remaining hospitals near Rafah.
This is where it is.
Described a sort of apocalyptic scenes of 500 people being brought in every day. Let's take a little listen to what he had to say.
So they have complex wounds. Their wounds are not healing, and they're getting complications due to that. Malnourished. Everyone is malnourished. And children, you see, they're like literally like children are. You can see them, and you can see the hunger. You can in their eyes, And when they see something, you can how many days this child has been hungry.
Did you get many babies being brought in?
Yes. There is no facility in there for a pediatric ICU, so they are brought to the European hospital as well. So
there's no pediatric ICU working.
So there is the volume of the pediatric workload on this hospital is huge, and they do not have enough facilities to cope with that.
What is your reaction to that, Colonel Lerner? Because he in that interview, it was horrific what he was telling me, and he talked to 500 people a day, many women, many children, babies being brought in every single day. That they've run out of a lot of medication. They've run out of most anesthesia.
They don't
There's
have
a 10-year-old
anything.
boy, he had to amputate his leg without anesthetic. There's a constant of drones, that people are coming in with wounds from gunshots, and so on. And this is relentless and incessant. And Israel is about to go into Rafah, where 1.5 million people are currently there because they've been driven there
If you
by what
look at
happened
his
in the north of
face,
Gaza.
guy,
And the vast majority of those people
about what
are
he's
not
going to
Hamas
say.
terrorists.
He's not even
They are
listening.
civilians, and many of them are going to die if you do this. How do you morally justify that? I understand the desire to get rid of every last Hamas terrorist, but how do you morally justify what may now happen in Rafah, and given the enormous civilian death toll that is likely to go with it?
I watched the entire interview you did with the doctor, broadcasted yesterday, and I agree. What is going on in Gaza is indeed horrific. The tragedy that is unfolded in the course of this war, the human tragedy, is really unbelievable. And in these times where we are and continue to be war averse as societies, we look at the images and hear the stories of families torn to pieces, of communities that are broken down, and societies that are suffering. And I absolutely agree with the understanding that war is a tragedy, and there is no such thing as a war that does not result in a humanitarian crisis. But the alternative of fighting Hamas is in action.
That's one of the things that's in their propaganda piece. They go, I know war is really sad. It's really unfortunate. But what are you going to do? Some Russians die. What are you going to do? You know what I'm saying? War's bad. That's in their propaganda book, their talking points, their set of talking points, when this isn't a war. I will never stop saying that. I feel like it always needs to be a reminder to people that this is not a war. No matter how many times they say it, it is not a war. A war has two sides with militaries. This is asymmetrical. Gaza doesn't have a military. They don't even have an airport, let alone a military. So calling this a war implies that there are two equal sides that are engaged in this warfare, when one side has Iron Dome and all the military might of their country, including the backing of the United States, and one has militants that are using, at times, bomb parts that come from shit that Israel dropped. Please. It's just like, it's maddening. It really, maddening.
Action. Inaction by raising a white flag to Hamas so that they do it again and again and again. Now, I would say we do everything in our power in order to limit the civilian casualties. And I would say that based on everything that the IDF is conducting, unprecedented precautions in order to limit civilian casualties. But there is no modern war that has been fought without civilian casualties. And I don't accept the Hamas numbers that they're telling.
Of course not.
Every single one of the civilians that have been impacted, whether Palestinian or Israeli, by this war is truly a tragedy.
First of all, he says they don't accept Hamas's numbers. Every single other time that Gaza has been under assault, there have been independent investigations by the UN and other agencies, including Amnesty International, in which they have confirmed that the numbers that Hamas gave were correct. If anything, we are undercounting it because we don't have any idea about the people under the rubble. Further, if you notice, the counting kind of stopped like 2 months ago. We were 32,000 like months ago and they just stopped counting. And there's a recent report that said based on birth records and based on records that they keep of the civilian population, that so far since this onslaught started, since this genocide started, there have been approximately 9,000 males killed. But then they say, out of the Israeli government says, oh no, we've killed 13,000 Hamas members, okay? 13,000 militants we've gotten rid of. Have you though? Because in order for that to be true, Hamas would have to include a couple thousand grandparents and children, since they can only they can only account for 9,000 men. So where are the rest? Where are you getting the rest of those numbers? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
The IDF currently in a humanitarian operation in order to increase the amount of supplies, whether it's medical supplies, food supplies across the Gaza Strip.
But there is nowhere near enough, as you know, there is nowhere near enough going in to help these people. And I'm talking about the innocent people in Gaza, the women, the children. Half the population is under 18. And hearing this doctor talk about amputating a 10-year-old boy's leg with no anesthetic, it's going to shudder down my spine. And is only going to get immeasurably worse if you invade Rafah. And I would also ask you, Colonel, you're sounding very somber when you talk about what's been going on, which is the correct response, I would argue, from anyone involved in this war. But I want to play a little montage. This is of IDF forces not taking it quite so seriously. Let's take a look.
Oh, they got rid of the music. The music was so good. Look at these. Look at these depraved sickos. It's so evil. Most moral army in the world. They're just so moral. Look at how moral they are. Do you see all the moralizing and the moralness? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Destroying people's homes, playing on their school stuff, mocking them.
There's a lot more of that. And the only reason we have access to it is it's been put onto platforms where it's then been picked up on social media. You were in the IDF 25 years. Do you condemn that kind of trivializing?
Yes, exactly. And another thing that I want to point out, that is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, I posted a video like, I don't know, 5 months ago or something. It was pretty early on. I think it was in November, where I just put a bunch of clips together of their psychotic during social media, and then they took mine down. So that just shows you who's really in control of our social media. They didn't have anything to say about the videos that the IOF were posting that were psychotic as the ones you just saw. But they took mine, just highlighting it, just showing it. So explain how this is the most serious and moral army that really cares about its people and cares about humans and cares about civilian populations as they raid people's homes and try on their stuff and steal it and mock that these children got their toys and their houses destroyed. That's evil. That's evil. But you know what else is even evil? More evil? Well, I don't know. I won't say more evil. But what's even more credible than them pretending to care about civilians and calling themselves the most moral army in the world as they do shit like this is going to be his insanely embarrassing excuse making for this. Okay, watch. Guys, pay attention to how deranged his response is.
Of what is going on, given the enormous death toll of civilians?
So the last segment we saw there is actually a piece of footage that the IDF put out where Hamas had hid rocket launchers in a scout clubhouse. So other than that, of course, everything and the images and the videos that are distributed by...
Pause. You got that? So them doing disgusting, heinous shit and mocking and laughing at civilians, homes that they destroyed, playing with their toys, stealing and raiding women's underwear. That happened because Hamas was hiding there. Oh, okay. It's so insane.
i.e. soldiers, things need to be broad, and I can say disciplined as well, and that is what we're doing. I would also add, in this day and age where everything is on social media, we need to be extremely cautious, and we need to deal with it. And I would add we to do better, because
all the civilians.
So the last segment we saw there is actually
I ran this back because I really want you guys to internalize what he just said, his response, like really internalize the depravity of what he just said. I'll run it back.
A piece of footage that the IDF put out where Hamas had hid rocket launchers in a scout clubhouse. So other than that, of course, everything that in the images and the videos that are distributed by young soldiers doing boisterous things needs to be broad, and I can say disciplined as well, and that is what we're doing. And I would also add, in this day and age where everything is on social media, we need to be extremely cautious, and we need to deal.
Can you guys guess what was probably the most disgusting about that? Can you guys guess what probably the most disgusting in that line? He pretends to care. We're going to do an investigation routine. They're always going to do an investigation. It was the fact that he called them boisterous, doing boisterous things. That is so sick. That is so sick. They are desecrating mosques, demolishing houses, invading women's drawers in their underwear, and laughing that they know that these people are dead. And you call that being boisterous, sociopathic, psychotic, boisterous. And again, I want you guys to keep in mind when you think about that language that's used to describe the IOF soldiers, that all of them are over 18. So yeah, some of them are young guys, but they're all over 18. And they get to be referred to as boisterous. But Palestinian boys will get referred to as men, fighting age men, even if they're 11. Okay? Even if they're 12, 13-year-old, they'll get referred to as military age men. But then these guys, some of whom are like middle-aged, okay, are like, we boys, and like, look, they're like desecrating people's homes after they beat them to death, but like, they're just being boisterous, And for the ones who weren't, we'll do an investigation. Like, get that. It's so evil. So evil.
With it. And I would add to do better, because war is not fun and games. It is a challenging reality, and a reality we need to express.
He's like, this is the media. I should tell my boys, my boisterous boys, that they shouldn't be doing their crimes so often on camera. It kind of looks bad. You think?
Not only the humanity in fighting, because there is humanity in fighting, because as I said, there is a humanitarian operation that goes hand in hand with the operational actions. Relating to the comment you had just earlier about not nearly enough goods going in, just yesterday, 366 truckloads deploying their port.
And defended Israel's right to defend itself. But what I can't understand now about this desire to finish off every last member of Hamas, regardless of civilian casualties, is that the scale of...
All right, so he went through a bunch of their talking points, and a bunch of Israel has a right to defend itself. Okay? That's like what they always say. It's like one of their main talking points. And it's such gaslighting because they are constantly engaging in offensive terrorism. And then they turn around and go, yeah, but we have a right to defend ourselves, okay? Defend ourselves. From whom? It's the upside down world. I feel so bad and sad for Palestinians that have had to spend their whole lives like just being endlessly gaslit like this. That not only are they continually brutalized and have been for decades and decades and decades, but then on top of being brutalized, they're constantly told that they're not seeing what they're seeing. It's their fault. It's not really happening. It's just endless gaslighting. It's Israel's right. And also, how come Israel's the only country that gets to say that? They have a right to defend themselves. Israel has a right to exist. Says who? Says who? What nation state? No one even says that about America. Oh, the United States has a right to exist. Does it though? Like, oh my gosh, it's so dark. Always be mindful of the way that these people craft their lies. Yeah, exactly, Travelin. No one's ever like, ever says Palestine has a right to defend themselves. The Palestinians have a right to defend themselves. Palestine has a right to exist. I have never seen anyone say that. Literally no one. I've never seen anybody say that. And yeah, you're going to have a hard time, trying to do all that. We're trying to watch out for civilians when the norm is for them to laugh about it. The norm is for them to celebrate it. All right, I don't know if it'll let me do. So nice of whether or not the Palestinians. I actually asked the Zionist the question about whether Palestine has a right to exist. He said no. Of course. And you know what though? Another thing is that just shows you how the double standards that we live in, especially even here in the United States with social media and stuff, is that I'll post parody videos that are about public figures that like TikTok says that they allow, and they'll take my videos down and say that I violated their guidelines. But then I'll post a video about Gaza or about Palestine, and Zionists will literally come into my comments and praise that Palestinians are dead. They'll cheer it. They'll be like, glad we cleaned it out. We should finish cleaning it out, which is like literal, unironic, genocidal language. And their comments, I report them, won't get taken down. It's truly amazing who gets to be human and who doesn't. All right. What I'm trying to do is pull this up. Yeah, for real. All right. This is the IOF one that I'm going to make you guys sit through, I promise. But this is also another great example of the way that their propaganda has been rehearsed over and over and over again. And this guy just refuses to answer. Just refuses to answer. It's amazing.
1 week into the war, your army spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, showed the world a virtual 3D model of an alleged Hamas command and control center, which stretched several stories beneath the largest medical facility in Gaza, the Shifa Hospital, which you know very well of. Why?
Oh, that's so rageful. It's not showing it.
Of such a command center.
Oh, you know what? I think I know what I did wrong. I think I know what I did wrong. I think one of the things that makes this hard is that I don't have a monitor. I'm like trying to do everything off my screen. Listen to this joker, okay? This is the anatomy, okay? This is the anatomy of propaganda. Listen how this joker dodges the question from this guy over and over and over again about the fake Hamas command center.
1 week into the war, your army spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, showed the world a virtual 3D model of an alleged Hamas command and control center, which stretched several stories beneath the largest medical facility in Gaza, the Shifa Hospital, which you know very well of. Why haven't you shown any proof of such a command center?
Yama, this line of questioning really shocks us here in Israel because
why?
We have.
No.
We've shown the world media. Many journalists have been taken to those tunnels. We've seen those bulletproof doors.
Amazing. Lies right out the gate. Lies right out the gate. First of all, I love how the guy is like, you asked us for proof? Shocking. This is shocking. I am shocked that you guys asked us for proof. How dare you ask us for evidence? How dare you ask us for evidence? I mean, that's really what this vibe is. You ask us for evidence. And then he's like, well, we have shown you proof. No, this guy's asking about a very specific claim. He's not asking if Hamas has tunnels in Gaza. That is a broad claim. He's asking about the simulation that was put out shortly after October 7th, claiming that they had a simulation of a 3-story Hamas command and control center. And if you have a simulation of it, why don't you have photo evidence? You have a simulation of it. You were able to investigate it so thoroughly that you were able to get in and see the fact that, see it so clearly that you could do a simulation, but you don't have any physical evidence or proof. And as you'll see, we found the calendar though. And as you'll see, he continues to try to lie and to claim that they provided evidence when they didn't. But thankfully, this journalist actually doesn't let him get away with it.
We've seen
It's truly an amazing thing to actually see a journalist do their job. Because I'm so used to here in the United States, they just take whatever the Israeli government says at face value.
cells, terror dungeon
Specifically with
network.
Shifa Hospital, what you've shown the world are abandoned tunnels and shafts and weapons your forces claim were found inside the hospital. That does not prove that Hamas had a 3-story underground command and control center under the Shifa, a claim Israel has used to justify the attacks on hospitals all over the Gaza Strip.
I'm quite disappointed at this line of questioning, and it's not just from you, because we face this
amazing
unreasonable burden of proof of the horrors of Hamas strategies. We've shown you tunnels.
Unreasonable burden of proof? No, actually, again, mad gaslighting. We don't ever have them give us proof. Their thing literally is just trust me, bro. Like, they never offer proof. Never. It's just trust me, bro. So, like, this idea, and then do you guys see how he tries to change the conversation to tunnels in general? Again, this is asking him very specifically about a command and control center under Al Shifa Hospital that they claimed and had a simulation for. But when he asks him, where is that? Do you have proof of that? First he goes, oh, it's just an unreasonable burden of proof. Unreasonable to ask for evidence of any kind. Just like they did with the mass rape hoax. Then he goes, we did give you proof. We did give you proof. It was, it's like tunnels somewhere. That's not the question.
Hamas has never denied they had tunnels under
Yes,
Gaza.
exactly.
That's an open secret. But you're claiming that they had a command center under the biggest hospital in Gaza. You use that as an argument to lay that hospital in ruins.
Exactly.
And that's why it's a question the international press has to ask you. Where is this command center under the Shifa Hospital?
Asking questions is, of course, the right thing to do for any journalist.
Guy looks
But
like
we
he wants
have
to
produced
die.
evidence of terror tunnels underneath the hospital.
You have provided as much evidence for these quote unquote terror tunnels under the hospitals and this command and control center. You've provided as much evidence as any of the people that are pushing the Zaka people pushing the fake rape hoax has produced, which is none.
I apologize, Yama, if it's not enough for you. I apologize.
You know what this reminds me of, you guys? This is mad narcissism and actual abuse. This really reminds me, I get vibes from like my childhood, because like if you were someone who like grew up in a narcissistic, abusive family where there was a lot of gaslighting, this pattern where it's all first you lie, then you deflect, then you say, oh, well, we did do proof. Then you continue to lie. And if you get more and more pushback, eventually you turn it around and try to make yourself a victim by being like, why isn't it enough for you? Why isn't it enough for you? This reminds me of like when I was a kid, my mom, who was like a narcissist and abusive, would be like trying to gaslight us. And if we push back a little bit, she'd be like, I'm sorry, I'm a piece of shit. I'm sorry, I'm a terrible mother. I'm sorry, it's never enough for you. This is literally what Israel does. They're an abusive parent in an alcoholic home, gaslighting their children. And then when you ask them questions for evidence or confront them on anything. They lie, they deflect, they blame you for the victimization that they caused. And then if all that fails, they go, I'm sorry, I'm not enough for you. It's so, oh my gosh.
The fact that we found RPGs in an intensive care unit.
Was that the question?
I apologize for the fact that we were fired on from the maternity ward. And I can tell you one thing, it wasn't the midwives that were firing at us. You know, we've killed at least 13,000 terrorists.
No, you haven't. No, you haven't. As we discussed earlier, there is zero evidence that they've provided that they have killed 13,000 terrorists. And by the way, I don't trust anything they have to say to begin with, because the way they define terrorists is if you're male. That's how they define it. So you could be a 2-year-old little baby boy and they'll call you Hamas. So I'm not taking any of your numbers. Second of all, you haven't substantiated any of it. You love to talk about the Hamas-run health ministry and how you don't believe their numbers. I don't believe your numbers either, Playboy. And why do you look so nervous? You look nervous. You look very nervous, like someone who's caught in a lie. Terror tunnels, Lamau.
Terrorists. I remind you again.
How do you know that you've killed 13,000 terrorists?
Because they were firing at us.
So did you do a head count?
Yes.
So this is a verifiable fact, according to you.
I don't say that we have their lists. I don't say we have their names, but we have killed 13,000 combatants.
Yes, but it's just
combatants. It's weird. You guys notice this, how he says, we don't have a list of names. That's really weird, because anybody who knows anything about the Israeli military knows how advanced it is. They love to brag about it. They love to brag about how good their technology is, how good their surveillance is, how advanced their military is. They also keep all the Palestinians in a cage and make them go through checkpoints all the time and make them register. So they have all their information. This idea that you don't know who you've killed, you think you've killed 13,000 Hamas militants, but you don't know because you don't have their names, really begs the question, why don't you have their names? Because you guys know the names of every single Palestinian that lives in Gaza, because you surveil them like they are prisoners. You keep them in a pen like they're animals. And you are the self-professed most advanced, or one of the most advanced armies and military technologies in the world. So why don't you have their names? It's almost like this is made up.
Mr. Mensur. It's just a number. We have never seen any concrete proof that backs up this number.
Yep.
So I'm a spokesman for this government. I'm a spokesman for this government and the Israeli people. And I'll tell you right now that we have killed 13,000 terrorists.
I like how, to bolster his claim, instead of using evidence, he just reaffirms that he's the spokesperson. Well, how do you know you killed 13,000? I told you I'm the spokesperson. Evidence? No, did you not hear me? I'm the spokesperson and I'm telling you that we killed 13,000. My credentials? I'm a spokesperson for a lying regime. Trust me, bro.
Have executed the gold standard when it comes to firing and directing our war at the terrorists.
Really? Because for those of you who've been with me up to this point this whole time, you saw what that ex-IOF soldier said about the way that their army conducts their operations. Gold standard? That's the gold standard. Bro, everything that comes out of their mouth is a lie.
Getting civilians out of harm's way.
It says the figures from the Gaza Health Ministry, Hamas's health ministry, are reliable, that they even passed international scrutiny in previous wars. In fact, if you look up the numbers...
He's like, where's the door, this guy? He's like, I got to get out of here.
Israel's and Hamas's casualty numbers were almost identical. Why would suddenly they lie in this current crisis and war?
The health ministry does not differentiate between a civilian combatant, which is a tragedy. We say that very, very clearly.
We say it very clearly because it's in our propaganda handbook.
We do.
The UN says these numbers coming from the Hamas Health Ministry are reliable. There's no reason to doubt them because several times this health ministry during this war has
because if you look at the
published
guy's
long
face, he
lists
looks
of
like he wants to
names
get the
where
hell
you
out
have
of
the
there.
ID
He does
number,
not like these questions.
their names, detailed lists have been published documenting who has been killed inside the Gaza Strip during this war.
Yeah, Flux, they say civilian combatant because they want to use an excuse to kill civilians. Because what is a civilian combatant? It doesn't mean they're armed. You guys have made clear that they don't have to be armed.
Claim you've killed 13,000 Hamas fighters, yet you haven't produced any lists whatsoever. No
There is a
documentation.
list.
It's a number you're giving the world.
It's a number which our army has given to us in a democratic country with check.
LOL. Actually, again, you guys notice through this whole thing, every time the guy asks him a question, he deflects because he can't answer it. Do you have any evidence, even a shred, that you have killed 13,000 militants? And then he goes, well, after he already tried a bunch of other excuses that didn't work, because none of those excuses work. So then he goes, actually, we have a list that was given to us by our lying army, and they claim it. And if you don't believe me, I will let you know that we live in a democratic country. Democratic country. Democracy. Democracy. You need to trust us because we live in a democratic country. Be so for real right now. The only democracy in the Middle East.
Media scrutiny with all the Western values that Norway holds dear or should.
I ask you again, where is the concrete proof that you've killed 13,000 fighters?
Great job following
you
up
claim
with
it,
this
but
guy.
where is the proof? At least Hamas's health ministry has published lists confirming who has died several times.
I wouldn't take Hamas's word for anything.
But we should take
literally
yours.
Anything.
So we shouldn't believe Hamas, we shouldn't believe the UN, the World Health Organizations, all the aid groups on the ground, rights groups from all over the world. We shouldn't believe them, we should believe the Israeli government.
You'll excuse me if I feel extremely skeptical about almost anything which comes out of the United Nations. We are a proud member of the United Nations. Our officials express...
Again, such insane trying to be victim. The United Nations does, because of the United States, the cover that the United States gives them, they get such special treatment. And he's like, you'll forgive me if I don't believe what comes out of the United Nations. Okay, so allowed to do genocide denial and say the United Nations numbers don't matter, that MC International doesn't matter, that no one matters, but we're supposed to take your word for it with no evidence. Okay.
In the United Nations, and we defend ourselves as is the right thing to do.
Wow. It really is something. It really is something. It's just insane. Does anybody else's head hurt from that amount of lying and gaslighting? Oh, I see. There we go. Yeah. It's so infuriating. Like, it's next level gaslighting. Like, I feel my head hurts from it. Super and kids. Yeah. I know it's to be expected, Captain Guy, but it doesn't make it any less maddening. Yeah, I feel I'm having, like... It's just insane. It's totally insane. Yeah, it is pretty depressing that so many people fall for it. It really is. And after all this time, too. All right, you guys, I got to show you. Yeah, so all of that insanity. Guys, all of that was just this week. All of that lying and those reports and the gaslighting and the Zionist talking points that come out of their playbook that they do every time, that was all just this week. Yeah, so the whole thing is, the whole thing is that they can do nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. In fact, I think that they show it in, have you guys seen, oh, how do I close this? Have you guys seen The Occupation of the American Mind? Did any of you guys see that? I actually got a recommendation from someone in chat that told about that. Oh, my first super chat. My first super chat of the chat. Thank you, San Pablo 147 for the $5. And your comment says, they're also full of shit. It actually gives me hope because it's completely unsustainable. Like if we're a company, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. If you want to have hope during this, is that we are now living in a time where it's getting harder for them to maintain this facade. It's getting harder for them to maintain this shit. If you haven't seen the occupation of the American mind is really good if you're an American, because obviously if you're not an American, then you already know that America is highly propagandized by Israeli propaganda. But if you're an American, it really hits home with like how much we've been lied to and the systematic approach that has happened over decades and decades to ensure that American citizens never really knew anything that was really going on and always kept their support for the Israeli regime. There's a part in there where Frank Luntz, who is also a Zionist hack, Republican operative who pretends to be a pollster, writes manual for the Israeli regime. It's like a manual because Frank Luntz is an apparatchik. Like he's hack for the Republicans and for the Israeli regime. So he writes this kind of like on how to combat when people point out their war crimes. Like it's like company, if you're trying to combat like a law or something, you're like, okay, here are talking points we're going to have. They explain it. Let me see if I can find the part without having to like go through the whole thing. Here.
We must continue to retain the control of these territories.
Just listen to Netanyahu talking in private to his right-wing settler base in 2001 about how he has no intention, despite what Israel agreed to at Oslo, of giving up land and ending its illegal settlement expansion in the West Bank and the rest of the Jordan Valley.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to really quick, you guys, but listen to the part that's coming up where he talks about Frank Luntz and his involvement in crafting propaganda for them.
אתן פירוש להסכם שיאפשר לי להחזיק את הדירה הזאת בקווי 67. איך עשינו את זה? אף אחד לא אמר מה זה אתרים צבאיים מוגדרים. אתרים צבאיים מוגדרים, אני אמרתי לאזורי ביטחון. בקעת הירדן מבחינתי זה אתר צבאי מוגדר.
Netanyahu is clear that Israel's not giving anything up. But he's also very clear that the way to make that argument is to invoke security threats. And he's especially confident that he can manipulate the American people to buy into this argument. This, of course, is exactly the cases made to the American people time and time again, whenever Israel's been called out for refusing to end the occupation and its settlement project.
We're willing to make great concessions for peace. But there is something that I will never compromise on, and that's Israel's security.
The conventional wisdom is that continuing the occupation makes Israel more secure. And if you buy that argument, then it's a license to occupy indefinitely.
What we're talking about here is something that is completely indefensible. Israel knows this. Israel knows this very well, and for that reason wants to talk about anything and everything else. They'd rather talk about terrorism. They'd rather talk about security. They'd rather talk about Iran. Anything but the occupation.
The reason they've been able to so effectively change the subject isn't because they're practicing some kind of mass mind control. The main reason is that the US government itself has had a vested interest in promoting the same narrative for almost 50 years now. This goes back to the start of the so-called special relationship with Israel in the late 1960s, when the US decides to deputize Israel and make it what the Nixon administration called a cop on the beat, to protect American interests in the Middle East, especially US energy supplies. Ever since, the American government has continued to give Israel roughly $3 billion a year in military aid, while also vetoing one UN resolution after another condemning the occupation and settlements. The challenge is to make sure that the American people stay on board with US aid, despite what Israel is doing.
All right, you guys can hear that, right? Yeah, he does have a huge head. It's very weird. But this is the part that I really want you guys to pay attention to, where he says they need to make sure that Americans stay on board with what Israel is doing, and how they go about this is like this. And once you read this document, or once you listen to what they say about it, you'll never unhear it. Like now that I've read this document and I listened to like what they were saying about it, now I hear it in every interview.
A number of well-funded public relations organizations have emerged within the United States to help Israel justify its policies, especially the occupation and settlements, on security grounds. One of these groups is the Israel Project. In 2009, the Israel Project turned to conservative pollster and rebranding expert Frank Luntz.
Frank Luntz. This is the man that reframed the estate tax as the death tax, healthcare reform as government takeover of healthcare. Now, some critics have called Luntz a spin doctor who manipulates public emotion, but Luntz would reframe that as Fox News analyst.
The Israel Project hired him to determine which talking points used by Israeli and US officials over time have been most effective in maintaining American sympathy for Israel. Luntz wrote up his recommendations in a 2009 report.
They said he was hired so that he could find out what talking points were the most effective in keeping Americans sympathetic to Israel. And then he wrote up a report.
Called the Global Language Dictionary.
If you want to understand how the propaganda works, especially in the US, you need to read the Luntz document. He's really clear that the occupation and especially the settlements are a problem. And he points to polls that show a large majority of Americans actually think that Israel should retreat to the 67 borders. In fact, he says, when you talk about land in terms of 67, you completely flip American sentiment against you. But, and this is his solution, if you bring up the danger of terrorism, you win back the support. The key, Luntz says, is the claim that the fight is over ideology, not land, about terror, not territory. In fact, these three words, terror, not territory, summarize the basis of the propaganda campaign in the US. And Luntz goes on to say that one of the most effective ways to make the conflict about terrorism is to refer to an obscure political document written in 1988 by a small group of ideologues, the Hamas Charter, that calls for the destruction of Israel. Even though the Hamas leadership effectively disowned the charter a long time ago, it's been PR gold for Israel.
Yeah, exactly. So it's amazing how they manipulate it. Like they're like reframe it so it's not territory, it's about terror, because they just have to keep saying that Arabs are terrorists and then, that's it. Reframe it as, this is about safety. There's about safety. It's so insidious. And they're literally admitting in this document that they lie and they come up with spin and talking points and lies in order to keep Americans supportive of Israel.
Luntz research has discovered that when Americans hear the words of the charter, Israel goes from bully to victim, and sympathy for the plight of the Palestinians dissipates. So he says, don't just quote it, read it out loud again and again. And his advice has been taken up, often hysterically, by Israel's advocates.
The Hamas Charter not only calls for Israel's destructions, ladies and gentlemen. Article 7.
Guys, this is so important to pay attention to. Like, I really would encourage everybody to read that Frank Luntz document. It's amazing to me how effective they were at creating these lies and framing everything. So it's about terror, not territory. And to make Americans feel more sympathetic to Israel, to quote this obscure document that was written in the 80s, that no one in Hamas even adheres to now. And it's interesting because when I first learned about this and first started learning about it, that was one of the first things that was sent to me to read. And it immediately made me less or more sympathetic to Israel. It's amazing how propaganda works, and propaganda does work. There are still so many people who have no idea what the truth is when it comes to Palestine. And they use that on me too, just like they use it on everybody. If you read that charter and you're like, oh my gosh, like, why would you want to, kill all these innocent people? He said, they don't just want you to read it. They want you to repeat it over and over and over again so that you can make Americans more sympathetic to Israel, believe that this isn't about territory, that's just about them hating Jews, and make you less sympathetic to the Palestinians.
For the murder of every Jew. It calls for the murder of every Jew. It's a Nazi document.
We have the Israeli prime minister saying movements like Hamas, that are national movements, are the same thing as ISIS.
Hamas is like ISIS. Hamas is like Al-Qaeda. Hamas is like Hezbollah. Hamas is like Boko Haram.
And they're completely not the same thing. And anyone who understands anything about the Middle East and political dynamics there will explain to you exactly why that is the case and immediately spot that for the propaganda that it is.
Hamas is as much a nationalist movement as it is a religious movement. And in fact, it often assigns priority to its nationalist goals over its religious goals. This false notion that Hamas is part of this Al-Qaeda network is not bought even by important elements of the American military.
In 2010, the United States Central Command, or CENTCOM, the highest military command in the US, issued a classified report that questioned the current US policy of isolating and marginalizing Hamas as well as Hezbollah in Lebanon. The report described the two groups as pragmatic and argued that putting them and Al-Qaeda in the same sentence as if they're all the same is just stupid. And it directly repudiated Israel's publicly stated view that Hamas and Hezbollah are incapable of change and must be confronted with force, warning that failing to recognize their grievances and objectives would result in continued failure in moderating their behavior.
And the US military isn't alone in this assessment. ISIS itself.
Bro, that's coming from, literally coming from the United States government, being like, comparing them to Al-Qaeda is just dumb. And ISIS. Yeah, well, they compare them to Amalek. Yeah, so I thought that that part was really interesting. That document was really interesting, especially when you think about what, like for me, once you read that document and you read the way that they practice their propaganda, the way that they lay out their talking points, you will start to notice that they do it all the time. They haven't changed their strategy. They haven't updated their talk. They haven't even updated their talking points. They haven't changed anything. It is the same talking points from that 2009 document that they repeat over and over and over again. And once you hear all of it, you're like, there's no way you can't hear it in all the propaganda that the Israeli government and all their apparatchiks put out. That's why we have to continue to spread awareness. Because I think we tend to think those of us who now are, aware of this and care about this knows, but not everybody does know. That's why it's important for us to continue to spread the truth and spread information about this, because a lot of people still don't. Yeah, they are. And that's why we got to keep it up. We have to keep up spreading the truth, because as they continue to lose the narrative, they're going to continue to get more desperate. That's why they banned Al Jazeera. They banned Al Jazeera because Al Jazeera is one of the very few outlets that's reporting on what's actually happening in Gaza. So as a result, they are banning them and get rid of them. It's really next level. I hate what's happening, but as long time supporter. Yeah, I think that Flux, you're right. That is a level of support and awareness about Palestine that has never happened in this country before. Never. Right. And that's another CW. That is another intimidation tactic they use, is to call everyone terrorists. And if you're an activist or you're talking about this, they'll call you a terrorist sympathizer, anti-Semitic, same smears that they're doing to the college students, same smears over and over and over and over and over again. So I want you guys to watch this Sean Hannity interview with me, which I know we don't care about Sean Hannity, but this is an amazing clip because what's her bucket, Kristi Noem, is trying to do cleanup about the fact that she killed her dog. I don't know how many of you guys heard that story. And it's so embarrassing. It's so embarrassing. Sometimes it's good, I think, personally, because I'm a person or a person who likes to laugh, to, especially since I read so much depressing stuff, it's also important to make fun of clowns and laugh. Like Kristi Noem always plays the nuclear card. Yeah, you're right. They do. Oh, yeah. I'm going to pause for a second, read this comment. My friend is in Khan Yunis and is shocked seeing everyone in the world supporting them. He's like, we all thought the world forgot about us. That makes me really happy to hear. Not happy that he's stuck in Khan Yunis, but that he knows, that he's aware that people around the world are supporting the Palestinian struggle and freedom movement.